Hey guys, and welcome back to Z3 Cubing. This is my 2020 Rubik's Cube collection. So this is my Rubik's Cube collection. Oh, come on, it happened again. Give me a minute. There we go, that's better. So today I'm going to talk about each of the 200 or so Rubik's Cube puzzles that I've collected over the past 8 years or so. I also have links to buy or watch videos about almost all these cubes down in the description. But let's get started. So up here we have my original N×N puzzles, so my first 2x2, 3x3, etc. from when I first got into cubing. So starting off with the LanLan 2x2, when I first got into cubing I was 8 or 9 years old and I wanted to collect all the original Rubik's brand cubes, so that meant from 2x2 up to 5x5, and I got this cube probably for my birthday or something, thinking that I was going towards that goal of getting all the Rubik's brands, but little did I know until many years later that it was actually a LanLan brand and not the Rubik's that I thought it was. It turns, fine, not that great. This is my original Rubik's brand 3x3, and it was actually the very first puzzle that I got out of all of these, back when Rubik's brands looked like this on the inside, and I did learn how to solve a cube using this one. I just went to the store and bought it, and I learned how to solve it, and yeah, it turns as well as a Rubik's brand can. This is my original Rubik's brand 4x4, also towards that goal of getting all the original Rubik's brand puzzles, and this cube is just pathetic. Just holding it in your hands, it feels like it's gonna fall apart. You can hear it kind of rattling apart, and if you try and turn it, it barely turns at all. And it's just super loose. It feels like it's going to fall apart. The pieces always pop out like this when you do any sort of turn on it. And yeah, I think it got this way from me, like taking it apart. I used to like to do that a lot because I didn't know how to solve them, and lubricating it a bunch, it just got really loose, and yeah, it does that all the time. The Rubik's 5x5 is the biggest set the Rubik's brand ever made, thus completing my collection of the original Rubik's brand puzzles, as long as I never knew about that LanLan 2x2. And this one, likewise, I never knew how to solve, and so I kind of took it apart and lubricated it a bunch. It got really loose on the inside, and now it just turns really bad. Also feels like it's going to fall apart. And the really hilarious thing about this one is you can actually get a center twist on them, which is something that you've probably never seen before on a cube. And one thing I want to talk about is on all of these puzzles, the original 2x2 through 8x8 that I got, I have these stickers on the puzzle that are actually called tiles from a company called Cubesmith that no longer exists. Basically, they're like really durable stickers, and they kind of have a bit of a nice texture to them. Now, since the original Rubik's brand never made it past a 5x5, around 10 years ago, a company called VCube came around and made a 6x6, 7x7, and eventually an 8x8 and 9x9. And so this right here is the VCube 6. It had some compromises, let's say. It turns very, very badly. It has kind of this clicking mechanism to keep the internal layers into place. It can have these weird lockups where you turn the middle layer and then suddenly none of the other layers turn. And yeah, it just doesn't turn very well, but it was very revolutionary at the time to have a 6x6. Likewise, the VCube 7 was also the first of its kind as a 7x7, a very revolutionary puzzle back in the day. This one, of course, also has some compromises. It does turn much better. It doesn't have a clicking mechanism, but it is this pillowed shape that you see on a lot of bigger cubes nowadays, because that basically allows the outer pieces to kind of hold on to the core on the inside, where it wouldn't be possible otherwise. And as you can see, my version of it is actually white. That was just kind of a mistake. I got it in white and never got it returned, and so that means it has black Cubesmith tiles instead of white. Now, the VCube 8 came out many years after the original VCube 6 and 7, so it actually wasn't the first 8x8 on the market. It's actually by far the newest cube out of all the ones that I've showed so far, and I actually got this cube after I got back into cubing. So I was first into cubing around 2011, and then I got back into it around 2014 when I started this channel, and this one also turns fine. It's not great. It pops a lot. But yeah, there are a lot better 8x8s out on the market. They also did make a 9x9, which I never got because I wasn't so excited about VCube after that one came out. But yeah, I also did cut the tiles in this cube. So Cubesmith never made tiles for a cube this big, so I actually had to buy the uncut material from them and cut them out myself. That's why you can see there are so many imperfections, especially on the white side. Next up, we have my main speed cubes. This is a set of puzzles that changes all the time as new and faster puzzles come out, and basically these are the cubes that I would use while speed solving any of the WCA events. That's the World Cube Association, basically the organization that governs Rubik's Cube speed solving competitions. Starting out with the Valk 2M, my current main cube for 2x2, there's going to be a lot of differences between these upcoming cubes and the ones that I've talked about already. First of all, they all turn very fast, so I can rely on them performing very well for speed solving. They're also a lot newer than these cubes, and so they have a lot of optimizations. One of those is magnets. Most of the newer cubes have magnets, so it kind of snaps into place as you do a turn, which makes it more stable and gives you a nice tactile feedback as you're turning. It's also stickerless, so there's no stickers. It has this colored plastic on it instead, and all around is just an amazing 2x2 cube, one of the best on the market right now, as with most of these cubes up here. This is the GAN 3D6 XS, my main 3x3 speed cube, and this cube just turns amazingly. It's a fairly new cube release, came out within the last few months, and a lot of the best cubers are using it. As you can see, it performs very, very well. It has a lot of the same features as the Valk 2 I was just talking about with magnets. These ones are actually adjustable magnets, so you can change the strength of them, and it's stickerless, all this sort of stuff. It also has adjustable elasticity, so in most cubes you can adjust the screw to change the tensions or how tight it is, but this cube you can also change the strength of the spring, so you can make it more or less springy, more or less resistance as you're turning. This is the Valk 4M, again another really great fast speed cube that I can always rely on turning really well in a competition. Again, this one has all the same features, it's stickerless, it has magnets on the inside. This one actually comes in two varieties of magnets, the strong and the weaker one, so this one has the stronger magnets, which makes a little bit of a difference. The Valk 5M, again my main 5x5, really not much to say about this puzzle. Basically the Valk 4M, but with one extra layer. This is the X-Man Shadow 6x6M, and you can tell that it's the oldest of my current 2x2 through 7x7 mains, because it's the only one that has stickers on it. So a few years ago, I used to much prefer stickered puzzles than stickerless ones, but over the years, people have switched a lot more to stickerless puzzles because they became legal in the WCA around 5 years ago. So yeah, I've been switching over all my mains to stickerless ones, and this is one of the only ones left. It still is only a couple years old though, so it still does turn great. This is the Yushin Hayes 7M, named after Kevin Hayes, one of the best 7x7 speed solvers in the world, who used to hold a lot of the world records. I should also mention that the Valk cubes back there are named after Mats Valk, also a really fast speed cuber, who has held some world records. This is the QiYi Big Sail 3x3. Now you may be wondering why I have another 3x3 up here and why it is so big. Basically, this is my main for a WCA event called 3x3 with feet, which is exactly what you would expect, solving a 3x3 with your feet. Now, this is actually a pretty controversial event, as you might expect, and so they actually announced that it would be removed beginning 2020. It is still December 2019 technically, so I guess I can have it up here, but basically it's really big so that I can turn it with my feet. This is the DaYan Skewb. So of course this is a speed cube version of a Skewb, which is a unique type of puzzle, which I have a bunch of down here. Basically, instead of being able to turn the sides like you can on a normal cube, you actually turn it around the corners. It's much faster than a 3x3, it's actually a lot easier than it looks. I can solve it in around 5 seconds when I'm doing it really fast in a competition. And yeah, this is just a speed cube version. It has magnets and all that stuff, and it has these kind of cool concave parts on the side to make for better grip. This is the X-Man Volt Square 1, again a speed solving version of a popular twisty puzzle variant called the Square 1, which has this weird shape right here. It turns on both sides in this weird kind of pattern, as well as across the middle, 180 degrees. It's about as hard to solve as a 3x3, and this one turns pretty decently. I have put magnets myself into this puzzle, because up until recently, Square 1s didn't come with magnets at all, and then after I made my video about the particular way that I magnetized it, a few companies came out with their versions of the same thing. This is the X-Man Galaxy Megaminx V2M, again a speed solving version of a Megaminx, where a Megaminx is basically a 3x3, but instead of having the 6 sides of a cube, it has the 12 sides of a dodecahedron. So it solves in basically the same way, it just takes a lot longer because it has more pieces, and this one in particular is called Sculpted. It has this nice grip on the pieces that helps with speed solving. This is the X-Man Bell Magnetic Pyraminx. So the Pyraminx, of course, is a very popular twisty puzzle that's in the shape of a tetrahedron, so it has 4 sides which are triangles, and this puzzle was actually invented before the original 3x3 Rubik's Cube, but it wasn't released until afterwards. This one, of course, the speed solving version, and the reason that it has magnetic in the name, like that's something super special, is this is actually the first cube out of all of these that had magnets. Originally, Pyraminxes had ball bearings inside, which made it snap into place, but this one used magnets, which was really revolutionary, and since then, all sorts of other magnetic speed cubes have followed. This is the Rubik's Clock, perhaps the strangest of the official WCA puzzles because it is a Rubik's brand, but it's definitely not a Rubik's Cube. It's kind of a twisty puzzle because these clocks kind of twist like this, and you can manipulate the pins, which makes different clocks turn, and there's also clocks on the backside, and you have to get them to all face upwards. It's a pretty easy puzzle, it's a pretty strange puzzle, and as you can imagine, it's very controversial and might be removed from the WCA in the future. This is my other Rubik's Clock. It's actually not one of my main puzzles, that one of course is, but I guess clocks get lonely when they're by themselves because no one likes them, so I had to put them together. Anyway, I did magnetize both of my clocks because of course they don't come like this, they were made in the 1980s, but this one is magnetized a little bit differently, the more standard way. And I guess we are moving on from my main speed cubes because this is definitely not a main speed cube either. This is called the YuHu Super Big 3x3 because it is a super big 3x3. So each one of these cubies is the size of a normal 3x3. So of course that makes it very hard to turn. You kind of have to use both your hands. Very difficult, but yeah, it's a very fun cube to do like fun challenges with. Try and solve it as fast as you can. And as much as you wanted this to be a super awesome turning Rubik's Cube in the shape of an A, it is not a Rubik's Cube, it's just a painted block of wood. A is my first initial, so yeah, it looks pretty cool. Alright, moving on to the next shelf. These are all mods, or puzzles that I have personally made, usually out of other puzzles. And the first few ones here are called sticker mods, so basically a modification to the stickers on a puzzle. Alright, so first up here we have the Minecraft Cube. So I guess I kind of lied about me making this puzzle myself because this is actually a V-Cube puzzle. So the same company who made the 6x6, 7x7, and 8x8 up there, they have a service where you can basically upload pictures to their website and make a printed cube out of it. So I did that with a bunch of textures from Minecraft many, many years ago, back when I used to play this game. I think at least this texture has changed since then. But yeah, it's still kind of a sticker mod, and it makes it a really fun challenge to solve, and of course it just looks really cool. Next is a 3x3 sticker mod that I did actually make. I call it the Pinwheel Cube. Basically I took an unstickered 3x3 and a set of 3x3 stickers and kind of cut the stickers up into this pattern right here and stuck it on so you kind of have opposite colors like this. So the cube looks kind of the same from this angle as it does from this angle, but obviously if you turn the sides like this, it's not quite solved because these colors don't line up correctly. So it's very tricky to solve. You have to make sure all the triangles kind of line up in the correct way, but it does look pretty cool in the end. This is another sticker mod that I made in pretty much the same way. I call it the checker cube because you get this nice checker pattern when it's all solved with the colors lining up in between the pieces like this. And of course it also looks very similar when you look at the back of it like this. But of course when you do a double turn like this, it's not actually solved because these colors don't quite line up. This is actually a little bit harder to solve than the Pinwheel Cube because if just one of these centers here is rotated off by 90 degrees, then the cube will no longer be solved. This is the calendar cube. It can display any date of the year. As you can see right now, it's back in November, so I can update it to December by just first finding the D, E, and C like this, and then lining up all the other things so I can find a 1 and all the right things. Basically, this is a set of CubeSmith stickers. Again, the company no longer exists, but it was a pre-made set of stickers that I applied onto this cube, so it's basically a sticker mod. But yeah, it's just a really cool concept using Rubik's Cube as a calendar. Just really fun to set out like on your desk and show everybody the current date. And here we go, Saturday, December 14th. This is the Grayscale Cube, another pre-made sticker set from CubeSmith that I applied onto a cube right here. Basically, the idea is instead of all the different colors of Rubik's Cube, you just have the shades of gray from white to black, which makes it, of course, very hard to solve. But the problem on this cube in particular is we have red, because I actually needed some black stickers for a cube that I was making. I didn't have any except on this cube. And then later on, I was making an American flag video and I needed red and white. So yeah, it's almost a Grayscale Cube, minus the red. This is another CubeSmith sticker set called the Supercube. Basically, you can see it's the same thing as a Rubik's Cube, except it has arrows on all the sides facing in one direction, and it's a little bit harder to solve than a normal 3x3 because these centers can be rotated in the wrong direction. So you have to get all the pieces exactly how they were originally, instead of being able to rotate these like you could on a normal cube. This is a 4x4 Supercube, same deal as the 3x3 Supercube, but it's actually a lot harder than a normal 4x4 because not only can this whole set of centerpieces be rotated around, you can also swap around individual centerpieces, so you'd have this one like facing that way, this one facing that way. It's just a lot harder than a normal 4x4. And this one's made out of a V-Cube 4, so you can see how the wonderful V-Cube quality translates to smaller cubes like a 4x4. Not that great. This cube, if we turn it very carefully, is a perfectly normal 3x3 that I made for April Fool's Day in 2018. Basically what it allows you to do is you can turn it like a normal Rubik's Cube, but you can also peel the stickers off and move them around in any possible way that you want, as you can see here. So you can solve it the classic way of just peeling the stickers off. This cube is the successor to the previous one, being made for April Fool's Day of 2019. As you can see, this one looks a little bit more normal and it does still turn just fine. But the trick about this one, instead of peeling the stickers off, you just take the pieces out and swap them around and solve it however you want. I dropped an edge piece there, but you can do that with all the pieces. Just take out an edge right here, swap it with this edge. Very easy to solve. You can solve it like this, or you can just take the pieces out. So next up from here on the shelf, all the way over to the end of the row here, I just have a bunch of miscellaneous mods that don't nicely fit into any other category. Next up, we have the classic Z3 logo cube, which you already saw at the beginning of this video during the intro. So basically back just over a year ago when I changed my name to Z3 Cubing from Lego Boy Z3, I needed a nice intro, so I decided to make this mod right here and use it as it kind of spins around to music, and that became my intro. Now I actually made this puzzle using a lot of manual labor. I started with just a basic 3x3 and I used that to kind of build up the pieces, build up the general shape, and I kind of filled it in with a bunch of epoxy sculpt and kind of sanded everything down, put the stickers on, spray painted it, all that kind of stuff until I made this perfect shape. This right here is a variation on the original Z3 logo cube mod. Basically after I made the first one, everyone was like, "That's cool, did you 3D print it?" And I was like, no, but that would have saved me a lot of time. So now I did actually make a 3D printed version of it. It is actually broken here because I made a video where I wanted a bunch of cubes to fall apart, and I actually broke it to make it fall apart. But yeah, it is pretty cool other than the fact that it's broken right now. It turns just like the original. It's not stickered because stickering takes forever. These right here are the Siamese cubes. It's a pretty basic 3x3 mod where you basically get two 3x3s like this, take a few pieces out of them, and then just glue them together like this. And it still does turn. Most of the layers do turn. Obviously, it doesn't turn on this direction right here, but you still can scramble it up. And it makes a pretty interesting challenge, unlike a normal 3x3. These are the fused cubes, another mod pretty similar to the Siamese cubes, but instead of just gluing the pieces together, the cores are actually completely fused together in a more permanent way. And basically, it turns pretty similarly. Only 3 of the sides turn on each cube, but it also makes an interesting solving challenge that's different from a normal 3x3. These are another set of fuse cubes, actually made from a pair of old original Rubik's brand puzzles, so of course they turn terribly. I actually made this a very long time ago, probably one of my very first mods. I think I had some like Walmart gift cards, so I went to the store and bought these two cubes. Fused them together. I could never get the glue to stick until recently when I got some nicer super glue, and I'm still kind of afraid these two cubes are going to fall apart. The fact that these cubes are so tight and squared off actually makes this mod harder to do, and I think that's why the glue would never stick together. This is another really interesting mod that I made just a few weeks ago. Basically, it's two void cubes, which is a puzzle I'm going to be talking about later. Basically, a 3x3 Rubik's Cube without the center, but they're chained together like this, so it's very similar to a fuse cube. It actually solves in the same way, but instead they're void cubes and you can kind of look through them, and they're not chained perfectly, like they're not glued together. They're just kind of chained in this interesting semi-connected way. These are a couple of more Siamese cubes that I made out of some really cheap mini 3x3s, as you can see here. This one's just a normal Siamese cube. It turns actually fine. I lubricated the cubes, but yeah, they're just glued together. This one's actually made a little bit differently. Instead of being kind of offset like this, it's actually only one piece that's glued together, so the cubes can actually turn a little bit more. So it's, yeah, kind of an alternate Siamese cubes that's probably a little bit harder to solve. These are the quad fuse 2x2s. Not actually a mod I made, but they are very similar to the fuse cubes that I've been showing you. I actually don't know how I would go about fusing two 2x2s together, but yeah, this is a store-bought cube. It does turn very interestingly because the inner 2x2s still can solve, just like a normal 2x2. Yeah, very interesting. They're mini 2x2s. They don't turn that great, but it is a very interesting cube, and it's actually kind of difficult to solve. These are some 3D printed extension mods that I made, actually out of the same mini 3x3s that I made the mini Siamese cubes out of. Basically, there's a mini 3x3 on the inside, and on the outside, there's a bunch of 3D printed extensions to make it into some other shape. This one right here is a cube octahedron, just kind of an interesting geometric shape, and this one is, of course, just a sphere. I haven't bothered stickering them up, and of course, they were both in white 3D printed plastic. This is a 2x2 octahedron made in pretty much the exact same way as those last two 3D printed extension mods. Basically, there's a mini 2x2 on the inside with these 3D printed extensions on the outside, spray painted black with stickers on them this time. It solves exactly the same way as a normal 2x2, and it's just this really interesting octahedral shape. This is a 1x1x2, one of the most difficult puzzles known by mankind. As you can see here, this puzzle is very old. I made it according to Me, Myself, and Pi's tutorial a very long time ago. It is actually made out of Legos, and yeah, I decided to put some really bad colored pieces of paper on it as stickers. They're all peeling off now, and a really terrible looking Rubik's logo on it. So yeah, one of my very first mods. This is the 1x1 cube, which I also made as a mod, and what can I say? It's the most difficult puzzle anybody has ever seen. Moving down to the next row, we're starting off with all of my barrel-shaped mods. Starting off, we have the 1x1 barrel. I lied, this is the hardest puzzle anybody has ever seen. The 2x2 barrel, made out of a normal cubic 2x2 in a process that takes many hours. This mod solves actually exactly the same as a normal 2x2, but it does shapeshift like this, so it kind of changes from a barrel shape into this weird shape like this, and it actually does have my custom sticker shades on here, which I picked out these particular colors and cut them to fit onto this cube. The 3x3 barrel is the first barrel mod that I ever made, so it looks a little bit rougher overall than my other barrel mods. It's also the only one that doesn't have my custom sticker shades that I was just talking about, so it has just kind of basic bland ones on here. And this one solves almost exactly the same as a 3x3, except for these four centers right here can be rotated incorrectly, which means that it would not be solved. The 4x4 barrel, again, regains my custom sticker shades, as with the rest of the barrel mods coming up here. And this one is quite a bit more difficult than a normal 4x4 because all these centers can be moved around in all sorts of different ways, just like a Supercube, which makes it more difficult to solve, and of course it also shapeshifts. The 5x5 barrel is the same story, also quite a bit more difficult than a normal 5x5 to solve because of all the different ways that you can move these centerpieces around, and it shapeshifts, and just everything you would expect from a bigger barrel. Of course, the most significant change at this point is there's just a lot more pieces, so it takes a lot longer to make this mod. Same things go with the 6x6 barrel. It's quite a lot harder to solve and way harder to make because you have way more pieces and they're more intricate and smaller and everything. You actually have this weird effect right here where the pieces kind of, you sand them down too far and it kind of breaks apart like this, which shows you part of the mechanism, but of course it doesn't look ideal. You have these black spots on them, but that's just kind of how you have to make it. And finally, we have the king of all the barrels, the 7x7. This one is just massive. I think it looks awesome, probably the best of all the ones that I've showed you so far. It's just such a big puzzle. It has all these rounded pieces. It takes forever to make. It's quite a bit harder to solve. And yeah, it just looks really awesome, especially when it's all scrambled up and shapeshifted. The Megaminx Barrel is quite an interesting one. If you remember the Megaminx from way up there, it's a 12-sided dodecahedron, and I turned it into a barrel shape. This one is the first one that I've showed you that actually requires extending pieces out. So as you can see, the normal face of the Megaminx would only extend out here. You actually have to extend it out with epoxy sculpt, which makes it quite a bit more difficult to make. And this one doesn't turn that great, but it still has a very interesting solve, and it shapeshifts a lot. This is the Redi Cube barrel. It's a barrel I made out of a puzzle called the Redi Cube, which you're going to be hearing about later. And basically, it just turns on the corners like this. It's a pretty easy puzzle to solve, but it looks pretty interesting as a barrel. I had two of them. I figured, why not mod one? This is the Skewb Barrel. So if you remember back to the Skewb puzzle up there, this is what a Skewb looks like in the shape of a barrel. This is definitely one of the more difficult barrel puzzles to make, just because you have to extend everything out, just like the Megaminx. The pieces have to be a lot bigger out. But unlike the Megaminx, this actually solves exactly the same as a normal Skewb. Not very difficult to solve, but it is certainly one of my favorite barrels. The square one barrel is made out of a square one, as you should remember from back up there. And this puzzle turns just like you'd expect, but it's actually unique among all the barrel puzzles that I've ever made, because this one actually doesn't shapeshift, believe it or not. Because of the way that the square one turns, it just always stays in a barrel shape, which funnily enough actually makes it harder to solve. Alright, can you guess what this barrel is made out of? What if I show you this side down here? This is actually a Pyraminx Barrel, probably the hardest of all these barrel mods that I've made. Not the most time consuming, that would be the 7x7, but this turns just like a Pyraminx, which makes it totally ridiculous. Of course, it has to be extended a lot, because if you think about the shape of a Pyraminx, you have a flat side on the bottom and it comes up to a point. You have to extend out all those sides and sand everything down into the shape of a barrel, so it looks kind of ridiculous in the end. This is the off-axis 3x3 barrel mod, which yes, is actually made out of a 3x3. Basically, when you're making a normal 3x3 barrel, you start with the two opposite flat sides, but instead of starting like that, you start with it kind of offset in a weird angle. So these are actually corners in the middle of the two flat sides, and your centers are like right here and here and here. And yes, it does turn just like a 3x3. It solves almost the same. You have to orient the centers, of course. This is a mini 3x3 barrel. It's just a normal 3x3 barrel mod, except made out of a mini 3x3. This is the Floppy Cube barrel. Basically, there's a mass-produced puzzle called the Floppy Cube that's a 1x3x3, and so it kind of turns something like this. And I made a barrel out of it. It's actually a super floppy cube, so it can do weird things like this too. So next up, from here to the end of the shelf, we have some more mods made out of 3x3s, followed by some mods called cuboids. So first up is the Octagonal Barrel. This one's almost exactly the same as a normal rounded 3x3 barrel, except instead of rounded, it's the shape of an octagon on this face, and it solves exactly the same as a normal 3x3. This is what's known as a cutter cube, so it almost looks like it can turn just like a normal 3x3. It can on these layers, but the middle layer is offset by 45 degrees, so you have to turn it like this before it's able to turn. So basically, to make it, you take a normal 3x3, cut the middle layers off on each side, and then you turn it back into a cube by extending out all the pieces that weren't big enough, and then you end up with a cutter cube. This is an inverted cutter cube, so instead of the middle layer being off by 45 degrees and turning like this, now the upper and bottom layers are off by 45 degrees and it turns like this. So there's also a cube called a Fisher Cube that has this kind of pattern on both faces, but basically it's offset by 45 degrees in all three layers, so you don't have to turn the middle layer before turning. But that's why you can also call it a Fisher Cutter Cube. It looks very similar to one. This is another cutter cube that I made much longer ago than any of these barrel mods or anything, and as you can see, this one is very imperfect. It has different colored stickers in the middle layer here, but it still does perform the same. And before I knew that this was called a cutter cube, I thought I had invented it, and I called it the half mix-up cube. This is a bandage cube. It's basically made by taking a normal cube like a 3x3 and gluing sets of pieces together like this, and preferably making them look all nice like I did right here. And then now sometimes a layer just won't turn if you want it to turn. So I want to turn this side right here, it won't turn. So it makes it a lot harder to solve. I have never actually solved this mod. And this is actually in the shape of what's called a Meffert's bandage cube, so it's a mass-produced version, but I actually made this one in particular. Now, unlike that last cube, which wasn't an original bandaging design, this one I actually did come up with myself. It has this kind of like brick pattern, alternating sides like this. So this side at all can't turn at all, but you can turn it kind of like this, and now you can turn this and mix it up more like this. It makes it quite a bit more difficult, and yeah, it's a pretty interesting puzzle that I came up with as an original design. Next up, we have a mod called the cuboid, which instead of being in the normal shape of a cube, you kind of have this weird rectangular prism shape, which means that the dimensions aren't equal on all sides. So this is a 2x4x4, made out of a 4x4. You obviously just glue the layers of a 4x4 together and cut it down as much as you can. It has to have this kind of weird pillowed shape. But yeah, this one solves pretty interestingly. I still don't know exactly how to solve it. It's pretty difficult, but yeah, very interesting 2x4x4. Likewise, this is pretty much the same thing but made out of a 5x5, so this is called a 3x5x5 cuboid, and as you can see, you cut it down as far as you can, and it kind of cuts into the mechanism in a weird way that kind of makes everything all weird and distorted. And that effect, which you also saw in some of the barrel cubes, is called Olzing, and it can look pretty cool. This right here is a 1x2x2, another extraordinarily difficult puzzle with a monstrous number of different positions you can put it in. 6. And I made this out of a mini 2x2 that's kind of on the inside right here with some 2x2 extension parts on the outside to make it kind of proportional like this. And similarly, we have another 6-position monster 1x2x2 cuboid, and this one is actually 3D printed, so it's kind of loose, but it does turn just like the other one. And then speaking of 3D printed, we have finally the 1x2x5. This one will provide you a little bit more of a challenge. Well, I mean, nothing's as difficult as the 1x2x2, but you know what I mean. So yeah, this one's also 3D printed, and it turns in this super awesome way like this. 1x2x5, just as you'd expect. not too difficult to solve. Now next up, from this shelf all the way down till partway through this shelf, we have non-WCA puzzles. So puzzles that aren't competed in the WCA, in addition to, of course, my mods. These are mostly mass-produced puzzles that won't be found in my list of main speed cubes up here, and also in all the WCA puzzles down here. Now it seems like on the first puzzle of every shelf, I always lie about whether or not a puzzle is a mod, because this cube actually is a mod. It's called a Ghost Cube. It is, of course, 3D printed from somebody else's design, but basically it's offset in the middle here, so you have to turn it before you're able to do this. And it is a 3x3 in this really weird off-axis shape. So as you can see, a center is right here. You have edges and corners. Every single piece is a different shape, which makes this extraordinarily difficult to solve. I have solved it a few times and it is just painful. Okay, I promise this one will be our last mod for a long time. So this is a Lego cube made, I guess, in honor of my old name, Lego Boise 3, as well as the fact that I just liked Legos as a kid. So basically it's a 3x3, but with Legos glued on instead of stickers, which makes for a really interesting mod. Very painful cube to step on, I guess. And you could also use bigger Legos and bandage across and actually make a bandage cube out of this that you can reuse and make into a different bandage cube. Next, we have the Rubik's brand Mirror Cube. Now, this is actually a very popular non-WCA puzzle. I see a lot of beginner cubers with different brands of this cube. Now, this is actually a Rubik's brand. I definitely do not recommend that you get the Rubik's brand because it turns rather badly. But basically, this is a shape mod of a 3x3, much like the Ghost Cube and a few of the other cubes coming up. It's just a 3x3 turned into a different shape. So instead of different colors to determine which pieces go where, you instead have varying heights of pieces. This is the YJ Axis Cube. Once again, another interesting 3x3 shape mod. It is in white and it doesn't turn very well, but it is a 3x3. And so right here is our centerpiece. We have big corner pieces that look like this, and edge pieces. It's pretty fun to solve, not too difficult, but you do have to deal with center orientation and just figuring out which pieces go where. But overall, it's a very fun and very cheap 3x3 shape mod. This is the Moyu Crazy Fisher Cube. Now, I was talking earlier about a normal Fisher Cube where you basically have a normal 3x3, but all the middle layers are offset by 45 degrees. This is basically that, but a little bit crazier because everything is also offset a little bit more in a different axis. So yeah, it just kind of shapeshifts all weirdly. It is just a normal 3x3. This is the Rubik's Void puzzle. It is a Rubik's brand cube, and it's the same cubes that I chained together in the Void Cube chain mod up there. And basically this cube turns pretty badly, but the point is it has a hole straight through the middle. Now I kind of block that off by putting a golf ball in the middle, which is kind of fun. You just have a golf ball inside of a Rubik's Cube, but it's a little bit more difficult to solve than a normal 3x3 because you don't have the centers as a reference frame. And I have replaced the stickers on this one in particular. This is the Cubix Tube, also kind of a 3x3 shape mod, but instead of making an interesting shape in the end, you have this kind of tube that runs all the way along the puzzle and out the other end. So theoretically, you could put a little ball in here and you could roll it around the entire kind of thing as a maze. And yeah, you have to solve it into this state. Of course, it does turn just like a normal 3x3 Rubik's Cube, and you have the colors that you have to put together into the correct orientation, and of course get the tubes correctly too. Now this is the Armadillo Cube. Now it turns just like a 3x3, but it's unique because it's kind of a shape mod. As you can see, it's a bit of a different shape than a cube, but that doesn't make it solve any differently. The unique thing about it is it's more of kind of a sticker mod. So it has 12 different colored stickers, one per edge. You still solve it pretty much just like a 3x3, but you have to match up the colors on the edges instead of on the faces. This is the Meffert's Gear Cube, similar to a normal 3x3 with centers and edges and corners, but as you can see, as you turn it, the gears kind of interlock with each other and kind of twist in this weird shape like this. So obviously if you do a single 90-degree turn, you then cannot turn the other sides. You have to do a full 180-degree turn before turning 180 on another side. So this actually makes it easier to solve than a normal 3x3. It looks a little bit more intimidating, but it actually is very easy because the way the pieces lock together, it just makes it so there are way fewer combinations of different states than on a 3x3. Now this is the Meffert's Gear Shift, invented by Oscar van Deventer, who also invented the original Gear Cube, as well as a few of the other puzzles coming up soon. It looks kind of just like a 2x2 Gear Cube, but all the gears kind of turn at once, which is kind of confusing. But what you can do is actually pull the entire thing apart and turn one face separately from the other, and then scramble that up and pull it apart on a different face, scramble that up, and it actually makes for a pretty interesting challenge that's not super obvious how to solve. Actually harder than the original Gear Cube, but most importantly, you can do this. Here we have the Oscar's Treasure Chest, again invented by Oscar van Deventer. What might appear at first as just a really bad turning 3x3 with really obnoxious shiny tiles on it. Once the cube is solved, you can actually pull one side off of it like this, and you can put whatever you want in there and then close it back up again, scramble the cube, and then you won't be able to get back inside until you solve it. This is the Wit Eden Mix-Up Cube, once again invented by Oscar van Deventer, and once again it looks like just a badly turning, weirdly shaped 3x3, but what you can do is turn a middle layer like this, and then you can keep turning the sides like this, so it kind of becomes all mixed up like this, which is why it's called the mix-up cube. It's actually fairly difficult to solve. Essentially, the center pieces and the edge pieces are actually the same piece on the inside, and so they can be totally interchanged. This is the MF8 Sun Cube, and it's pretty much the exact opposite of the mix-up cube. It looks not very much like a 3x3. It does turn like one still, but basically, instead of being able to turn the middle layers like this and then being able to turn a side, you can now turn a side like this. And so basically what that means is if you just have one single side turned by 45 degrees, you can still turn the cube and just keep on turning. So yeah, this cube is ridiculous. I have never solved it. It can get into some pretty ridiculous states. Like, I don't even know, does this even turn like this? No, it doesn't turn because that piece is blocking it, but it's just crazy. This is the QiYi Twisty Skewb, and basically instead of a 3x3 shape mod, this is a Skewb shape mod. So we have normal Skewb on the top, normal Skewb on the bottom, we have these kind of almost Skewb looking things in the middle, and it turns just like a Skewb, solves in nearly the same way. These centerpieces are a little bit more difficult to solve because you have to orient them, but overall a very interesting and fun to solve version of a Skewb. This is the Rubik's Tower 2x2x4. So this is a mass-produced cuboid made by the Rubik's brand, and it turns just like you would expect from Rubik's brand, and it has an equally ridiculous color scheme as you would expect from a Rubik's brand. It's overall, you know, an interesting cube, very fun to solve, but yeah, the turning is just bad. This is the QiYi 2x2x3, basically the shorter, easier to solve, and much better turning version of the last one. Yeah, again, a pretty interesting, fun challenge and not too difficult. This is the Z Christmas Tree 1x2x3 cuboid. So basically it's just a small little cuboid, very easy to solve, and it is in the shape and colors of a Christmas tree. This is the Meffert's mini keychain mole cube, or perhaps Mala cube, and you probably didn't notice, but this is one of the few puzzles up here that's actually not solved. It is totally scrambled. Basically how you solve it is that every face has to have all unique colors, so you can't have two of the same color on one face. And this cube was actually solved for the longest time. I looked up how to solve it and got it in the right pattern. But then one of my friends came along and was messing around with it and was like, how do you solve this puzzle? And I was like, it was solved in the first place. You just scrambled it without realizing it. This is the Maru Nano Cube 3x3. It measures in at just 15 millimeters across, which is smaller than a single piece of a normal Rubik's Cube. And it turns actually surprisingly well. It's very fun to do challenges with, much like the very big cube. I have solved both the small cube and the big cube, both blindfolded, one-handed, and with my feet. Now this is the Go Cube. Now this is one of the best smart cubes on the market. Now what is a smart cube, you may ask? Well, we can turn it just like a normal 3x3, but if we go ahead and get out our smartphone right here, it actually follows along with everything that we're doing in real time. And so of course you can scramble it up and it can tell once you've solved it. And so that means it can time you really nicely. You can race against other people online. And there's a lot of other fun little mini games. This is the GaN 356i, which is by far the best turning smart cube on the market, made by GaN, the same company who made my current main 3x3 speed cube. The same cannot, however, be said about their software. It is very glitchy, doesn't work that great. But overall, for just basic smart cube speed solving, it works pretty well. This is the QiYi Ivy Cube. You can think of it as just a Skewb, so you have these big centerpieces in the middle, as well as these corners on the outside, except half of the corners are no longer here. In fact, they are still there on the inside right there, but you can't see them. They don't have colors, so it just makes it a little bit of an easier version of a Skewb, and yeah, it's pretty fun to solve. This is the ShengShou Dino Cube. It is a very easy puzzle to solve. It's kind of like a Skewb because it's corner turning like this, but as you can see, every turn only affects 3 different pieces, so like you can turn this side, and the pieces don't affect each other, and so that just makes it really easy. So it's good for just a basic beginner puzzle that anybody can solve given enough time. This is the MoYu Redi Cube, which you probably recognize from the Redi Cube barrel that I showed off earlier. This is what that was made out of, and basically this is just a dino cube, but it also has corners, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult. You now have 4 different pieces that are turning every time, and so you can just have a corner that's twisted, so you have to make sure that you have everything lined up relative to those corners. It makes it a little bit harder, but it still is very easy. This is the QiYi Pentacle Cube, which is one of the coolest concepts for a twisty puzzle that I've ever seen. Basically, you might not be able to turn it at all when you first start, but what you can do is you can rotate these faces. You kind of have these stars on every side in a circle, and once you have them all lined up like this, a side can then turn, kind of like a 3x3. And you can kind of adjust it, maybe turn this side over here. So it's kind of like a 3x3, but not quite. It's kind of, you have to offset all the centerpieces just to the right place to turn it. You can turn it on the other sides, it mixes up. It's actually not too hard to solve, but it is a very interesting concept. This is the Meffert's Curvy Copter. Now instead of turning on the face like a 3x3 or on the corners like a Skewb or a Dino Cube, this one actually turns along the edges like this. So you can kind of turn it like this and turn it like this. It's pretty crazy. It's rather difficult to solve, probably about as hard as a 3x3. There's some weird algorithms at the end, and you can also do this, which is called jumbling. This is the QiYi Clover Cube. Now you may notice that this looks very similar to the Curvy Copter, and it functions in the same way too, but is a little bit simpler because it doesn't have corners. So very similar to the Ivy Cube and how that one was similar to the Skewb. This one's just like the Curvy Copter except without corners, which makes it actually quite a bit easier, and it of course can also jumble. Now this is another puzzle that looks almost exactly the same as a Curvy Copter, aside from the fact that it normally has centers. They usually fall out though, so I just took them all out. But basically it is a Curvy Copter. It can turn just like a Curvy Copter. It doesn't really turn that great. It can jumble and everything, do all that crazy stuff. But it also is a 3x3. it can turn like a 3x3. That's ridiculous. And yeah, the turning is pretty rough, as you would imagine, with so many different moving parts that move in all sorts of different ways. I can't even get it to do this turn here. But yeah, a Curvy Copter and a 3x3 at the same time. That's crazy. This is the infamous MF8 Super Square 1 Star. Now, it kind of became a joke a while back to just hate this puzzle, and it is a pretty bad puzzle to start with. It's white, the version that I have. And yeah, this inner part right here, you can turn it so that it affects a different layer, and it's kind of like a square 1 because it just turns 180 through this layer right here, if you can get it lined up correctly. And yeah, it's very awkward because you gotta line this up and it can get out of alignment and you can't turn it. But yeah, all these layers turn here. I've never solved it. I never want to solve it. It's kind of just a bad puzzle. So next up, we have the set of twisty puzzles that are in the shape of or function like a dodecahedron. So a 12-sided shape, kind of like a Megaminx. So these start off non-WCA and become WCA with the Megaminxes at the end. So the first one up isn't exactly a dodecahedron, but it does function exactly like a Megaminx. This is actually what a Megaminx looks like when you turn it into a cube. And so basically we have like the centers here, the edges coming out from the center. Everything looks very weird. It shape shifts very nicely. But yeah, it's a little bit pillowed. It was originally made as a mod by Tony Fisher. And yeah, it's pretty fun to solve. Kind of like a Megaminx, but you do have to deal with the centers and everything. And it's very hard to figure out what pieces go where. Next up, we have the ShengShou Gigaminx, which basically if you look at a Megaminx like a 3x3, the Gigaminx will be like a 2x2. So basically it's just the corners of a Megaminx. The edges are hidden in there. They don't have colors or anything, and the centers too. And yeah, so it's just a bunch of corners in a dodecahedron shape, which makes for a fun challenge. Next, we have the QiYi Pyraminx Crystal, a pretty cheaply made and not that great turning dodecahedral puzzle, but it is pretty fun and is very unique in the way that it solves. Basically, you have the corners kind of like a Gigaminx or a Megaminx, just on the outside. But on the inside, these pieces turn kind of like a Pyraminx, the way you can exchange them with each other. So kind of like the body of a Gigaminx with these extra Pyraminx edges in between. This is the Calvin's puzzle Megaminx Ball, which just like it sounds is a Megaminx turned into the shape of a ball. So yeah, a spherical Megaminx. This is actually a limited edition version. It's transparent on the inside. It actually came without stickers. You had to sticker it up yourself. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. You can see through all the pieces. Next up is the ShengShou Gigaminx. Now if a Gigaminx is a 2x2, a Megaminx is a 3x3, then the Gigaminx is a 5x5. Now there also exists a 4x4, 6x6, 7x7, 8x8, 9x9, and I believe also 11x11, and 13x13 versions of a dodecahedral puzzle. So this is barely anything compared to those ones, but like, it's just a really cool puzzle. There's a lot of different pieces. It's pretty fun to solve, and yeah, it's one of my favorite puzzles overall. I am missing a piece though. Next up is the Meffert's Megaminx, which is the first Megaminx that I ever owned back in the days when I was collecting those original N×N puzzles up there, and so likewise it does have QSmith tiles on them. This is actually a pretty small Megaminx compared to most of them nowadays, and it has a really bad color scheme because I stickered it before I really knew what the standard Megaminx color scheme was. This is the YuHu Megaminx, the first kind of speed cube Megaminx I ever got. A lot of people were really excited about this puzzle back when it first came out, and it did turn pretty well compared to most of the Megaminxes on the market. I never got mine to turn that great. It has this weird kind of convex design which makes the pieces all kind of loose and rattly. But yeah, it turns alright. This is the original X-Man Galaxy Megaminx, which I also used as my main back when it came out a number of years ago. This was definitely a very revolutionary Megaminx speed cube. It was the first one that was really actually turned decently. It has, instead of convex like the last one, kind of a concave design, which gives you a nice grip on all the pieces. And it was just a very, very good turning cube for its time. Now later, X-Man Design also came out with a version 2 of their Galaxy Megaminx, and they also came out with a version of it that has the entire face being concave like this, instead of each individual piece, which is called sculpted like the last one. The entire face is concave, and so I got it. I thought this would be like the new trend in Megaminxes. Apparently not. People stuck with sculpted, which is what I have now. So I bought this version thinking it would be a good choice, and before they ever came out with a magnetic version, I decided to magnetize it myself. So I bought a whole bunch of magnets online. It was pretty expensive, like $20, $30, and then they never came. Next up, we have puzzles shaped like a tetrahedron, so 4-sided like a Pyraminx. We're going to start off with some non-WCA puzzles and get on to Pyraminxes. Starting out with the ShengShou Mastermorphix, believe it or not, this is actually a 3x3 shape mod, so if you look at it kind of head on like this is like looking head on to a 3x3, so we have center, edges around there, and corners, and so you can turn it 90 degrees like this, and it scrambles and solves just like a 3x3, except of course it's quite a lot harder because you have to orient the centers, and the edge pieces can kind of swap around and cause weird problems you've never seen, and the corner pieces can also spin around too and also cause some weird problems. Next up is the MoYu Megamorphix, which is the same idea as the Mastermorphix that came before, a cube turned into a tetrahedron, except this time it is a 4x4 instead of a 3x3. So you can see here we have the 4 centers of a 4x4 as well as the edges and the corners, and this one has all the same problems as a 3x3, as well as more problems with arranging all the center pieces in the right spot. This is also a 3x3 Mastermorphix shape mod, so the same as the ShengShou puzzle I showed a couple back, except this is a mod that I actually made myself. So it's actually totally flat on every side, which is unique to the ShengShou one. And yeah, so we have turning just like a 3x3, 90 degrees, and this one is very pointy and very weird shaped with some moderate Olsing in the middle. This is the Meffert's Pyraminx Duo, also first created by Oscar Van Demeter. It looks kind of like a Pyraminx and kind of turns like one too, but every time you turn a corner like this, the 3 centerpieces also turn with it, and so you can kind of exchange centerpieces in between the corners like this, which makes for kind of an interesting solve. It's actually an incredibly easy puzzle to solve. It's not too difficult. You can give it to pretty much anyone and they'll figure it out eventually. And I also have 2 of them. I guess the lesson from this is that sometimes you order magnets and you don't get them. Sometimes you order a Pyraminx Duo and they send you 2. This is the ShengShou Master Pyraminx, or 4x4 Pyraminx. It's a pretty interesting non-WCA puzzle that's basically a Pyraminx, so it turns like this on all the sides, except it has an extra layer, so it's kind of like a 4x4 if a Pyraminx were a 3x3. This one is very fun to solve, and yeah, it just looks pretty cool. This is the 1x1 Pyraminx. Now I personally made all my other 1x1s, but this one's actually mass produced and sold by the Cubicle. And obviously it is an incredibly difficult puzzle to solve, probably even more so than the 1x1 barrel. This is the ShengShou Pyraminx, my very first Pyraminx, and so of course this existed before the days of magnets, so it actually snaps together using ball bearings. It's more of kind of a physical click rather than just the pieces attracting together, which is kind of a different effect. It doesn't turn as well. I did actually modify mine. I kind of rounded off all the corners to make it have a little bit more corner cutting than the standard one did, but it actually performed reasonably well considering what it was, and I actually speed solved with it for many years. This is the original QiYi Pyraminx. It was my next Pyraminx main after the ShengShou, and I remember this just being the best turning Pyraminx in the world. It doesn't turn that great, it still has ball bearings and everything, and I remember just being amazed that a Pyraminx could come in stickerless. Back when stickerless cubes were first made legal in the WCA, people only ever used like 3x3s in stickerless then, and it was just so mind-blowing to see a Pyraminx and also a Skewb in stickerless. This is the MoYu Magnetic Pyraminx. It seemed like one day, quite a few years back, just all the companies at the same time in the world all had the idea of adding magnets to their puzzles. So MoYu made a magnetic Pyraminx, QiYi made a magnetic Pyraminx with their X-Man bell up there, which I still use today. They still haven't come out with a better one since then. But yeah, this is MoYu's version. It turned pretty well, and I did like solving on it for a time, but I just like the X-Man a little bit better. Next up are the Pyraminx Force Cubes. Now you may notice that there are 4 Pyraminxes down here, all in a different color, and those are the 4 colors that are normally on a stickerless Pyraminx. So after stickerless Pyraminxes started coming out, this is actually the DaYan Pyraminx. There's a mod people do called a Force Cube, where basically you take 4 identical stickerless puzzles and separate them all out into their individual colors, and then assemble them together with the colors all matching. And so that's what these are. Of course, there's not much point to them without any stickers, but for now they still just look cool. Alright, now moving on to the Skewbs. Now most of these will simply be my past Skewb mains. Alright, now starting out with the LanLan Skewb, this was of course my first ever Skewb, and it does turn accordingly. It is a very old puzzle. Basically what I did on this puzzle, because it popped so much, is I actually made torpedoes, which are kind of a thing that help the pieces from not popping, out of Lego pieces, and one of them has evidently broke because there's a rattling sound inside, but it actually worked pretty well for the time that I used this cube. Next up is the MoYu Skewb, again one of those revolutionary puzzles that just turns so much better than all the ones that came before it. It does still have ball bearings, but it definitely is much improved to the LanLan. Next up is the original QiYi Skewb. This actually came out at the same time as the original QiYi Pyraminx, and so of course I was amazed that a Skewb could come in stickerless, and this one actually turns quite a lot better than even the MoYu one. Even till today, despite the ball bearings, it still turns pretty well. Next is the MoYu Magnetic Skewb, and so again MoYu also jumped on their Skewb design when magnets started becoming a thing, and they created this puzzle, which turned much better than any of the other ones before it, in part because of the magnets, and in part just because of some other design improvements. And finally, we have the X-Man Wingy, the last Skewb main that I had before the MoYu Aoyan came around, and this one actually has a totally concave design on all the sides, unlike the Aoyan, which just has kind of little concave bubbles in the middle, and I actually do much prefer the shape of this puzzle. It's just that the Aoyan turns a little bit better than this one. Next are the Skewb Force Cubes, or rather just the Force Skewbs, much like the Pyraminx Force Cubes down here, made in the exact same way. You get 6 stickerless Skewbs. I believe I used some cheap QiYi ones, and then I just made them into Force Cubes by separating out all the colors and then assembling them into their respective colors just like this. Next up down here we have the square ones. Nothing really too exciting to say about them. So first up we have the Cube Twist square one. C stands for Cube Twist, and this is my first square one that I ever got. It doesn't turn very well, and if you try and corner cut it, it will go crazy. And the reason I have it labeled is because I also had another square one that was identical to this, but it was a ShengShou square one. So I was kind of confused how 2 different brands of cubes could be the exact same cube. So yeah, this is what happens when you try and corner cut, by the way. Next is the QiYi square one, which again is one of those designs that just revolutionized the square one market. As you can see, it turns much better than the Cube Twist that came before it because it has kind of a spherical design in the middle instead of a cylindrical one like the Cube Twist. And yeah, it also came in stickerless, which was pretty cool at the time, but now it's just kind of standard. Next up is the YJ GuanLong square one, which somebody gave to me at a cubing competition for being able to recite the most digits of pi. I used to know 134, I don't really know them anymore. But yeah, I unstickered this cube thinking that it was my X-Man Volt when I wanted to resticker that one. It turns out these cubes look very similar, and I accidentally unstickered the wrong one. Next is the Yushin Little Magic Square 1 M, M for magnetic of course, so this is the first mass-produced square one that has magnetized middle layers like this, as well as magnetized layers like this, so it kind of snaps into the places where you're able to turn it. But it doesn't turn quite as well as the X-Man Volt that I use, and of course I magnetized my X-Man Volt like this before this cube came out, so I'm sticking with the Volt. Next down here we have what I call 4x4 plus, and so we have a bunch of 4x4s leading into 5x5, 6x6, 7x7, 8x8, and 9x9. This is, I believe, a YJ Yusu 4x4 that somebody randomly gave to me at a competition because I believe it's broken, so let's maybe turn it like this, see if any pieces fall out. Yeah, that's the one. This is the New Island Windstorm 4x4. Now, New Island is a company that I believe has been under some controversy in the past for like copying cube designs or something like that. But basically, they sent me these puzzles to review, and at the time, my best 4x4 was probably like a V Cube 4, so I thought they were just amazing. Today, they're, alright. Oh yeah, and here's the stickerless version of the New Island Windstorm. I did think it was pretty cool that a stickerless 4x4 could exist at the time. This is the MoYu Weisu 4x4, my first real main 4x4 speed cube, excluding like the Rubiks and the V Cube. And so yeah, this one turns actually pretty decently. There was a problem with like the inner pieces kind of popping out, and so I had to have it really tight, and so it kind of locked up a lot, but overall, it was a decent speed cube for its time. Next, MoYu upgraded that design with the MoYu Aosu, and this is the mini version of the MoYu Aosu. And this one definitely turned a lot better than the original Weisu. The pieces didn't pop out, you could have it a little bit looser. And yeah, it performed very well for a long time. Next came the QiYi Wuquei. A lot of people really liked it. I personally didn't use it as my main, but they did later produce a mini version of the Wuquei that actually had magnets pre-installed. So this is kind of when that magnet trend from Pyraminxes and Skewbs, and eventually into 3x3s, started transferring over to bigger cubes like a 4x4, and so you have magnets and a 4x4, which just makes for an amazing cube. Next came the Aosu GTS2M, MoYu's improvement on their Aosu puzzle, with magnets of course pre-installed. This is actually an Angstrom version of it, so it's actually made by the Cubicle to be super fast with their extra super special lubes. And it was a great puzzle that I used for a while, until the Valk 4M came around. Now this puzzle should actually be familiar because I talked about it in the beginning of the video. It is currently my main, but this is actually a weaker version of the magnets. These are actually standard magnet strength. The one that I use up there is a strong magnet strength, but this one just turns very well. It is by far my favorite 4x4. Oh yeah, and also after that came the MoYu Aosu 4x4 WRM, which is this cube right here. Yet another improvement to MoYu's Aosu line of 4x4s. Personally, I like it quite a lot, but not quite as much as the Valk. We've now hit the 5x5s with the V Cube 5. Now this puzzle came out at the same time as the original V Cube 6 and 7 up there. Very revolutionary at the time, and it turned actually pretty decent for a 5x5 at the time, with the Rubiks being the only other option. It was my first or second 5x5, I don't quite remember whether this one or the Rubiks came first, but yeah, it is in white plastic because I don't know. Next up is the Yushin 5x5, another puzzle that just revolutionized the market and totally changed the way that 5x5 speed cubes are looked at. The first actually decent 5x5 speed cube that there was, and I used this one for many years. I actually eventually put magnets in it myself, which made it turn a little bit nicer, and from the weirdness of the clicking noise that I hear right now, I feel like a few of them have probably fallen out. This is the MoYu Aochuang 5x5 GTS-M, and again, it is an Angstrom puzzle made by the Cubicle with their extra special lubes, and this cube just turns amazingly. I really improved my 5x5 averages from the Yushin using this cube, but now I have moved on to the Valk 5M. This is another V Cube 6, much like the one up there, except this is actually a newer version called the V Cube 6B, so it has this pillared shape like this, and as you can see from the turning, there's no awful clicking mechanism or anything anymore. It actually turns pretty decently. If only they had released this one back when they released that original one, this would have just been amazing. Well, I guess not that amazing, but pretty decent for a V Cube at least. This is the QiYi Wuhua 6x6, my first real 6x6 speed cube, and this one turns okay. Mine is kind of slow. I think I did something really bad to it with the way I lubed it, but it turns alright. It was a pretty decent 6x6 for its time. And likewise, this was my first ever real 7x7 speed cube, the QiYi WuG 7x7, and this one actually still does turn pretty great. The haze that I use now is a little bit better and it's magnetized, but this one is still very good. Next up, we have a 7x7 in a box that says YJ on it. Now I believe this is the YJ YuHu V2M, so it should be magnetic, and I have never touched this puzzle before. I actually got this in a package from the Cubicle that they sent me, and I never opened it until right now on my collection videos, so I've had it just kind of sitting there in the box. Let's see how it turns. Do some first turns. That's actually pretty good. I'd say it's relatively similar to the WuG that I was just talking about. It does of course have magnets though, which makes it a little bit nicer. Definitely not quite as nice as the haze, but I believe it is quite a bit cheaper than the haze, so yeah, pretty nice for budget magnetic 7x7. Next up we have the Mofeng Jiaoshi MF8, not to be confused with the brand MF8, it's just called the MF8 8x8. Now this is actually a really amazing 8x8 because it is only $30 as compared to the V Cube 8, which is like $60, $70 something dollars. And believe it or not, this one actually turns a little bit better than that cube too. It's definitely not the best 8x8 on the market, but for the price, I don't think you can beat it. And same story for the Mofeng Zhaoxi MF9 9x9. This puzzle came out a while back for $35, which is just ridiculous for a 9x9 that would normally cost more than $100. This was my first and actually currently only 9x9, and it really just does turn great, especially for the price. Next up on the bottom shelf, we have my 2x2s. First up, we have the YJ GuanLong Plus 2x2. I'm not really sure why I have it in white, but it's just a decent cube that is very, very cheap. This is a YJ 2x2 that is glow in the dark. It definitely doesn't turn very well, and I don't really remember why I have it, but it glows in the dark. This is the VCube 2B, so the pillared version of the VCube 2, and consistent with most of VCube's products, it doesn't really turn that great. This is a normal cubic VCube 2 that I actually used as a speed cube for a while. It was one of the first cubes that I ever modified to try and make it turn better. Turns out it didn't actually do really that much. Still can't corner cut. Yeah, I actually modified it way too far, and that sticker is the wrong shape, and yeah, it's just kind of a bad cube. This is the Rubik/GAN 2x2 speed cube, so basically one of the worst companies for making fast cubes. Rubik's teamed up with one of the best companies for making fast cubes, GAN, and they made a pretty decent cube right in the middle, so yeah, pretty decent for a Rubik's brand at least. This is the Moyu Lingpo 2x2, my first real main 2x2 speed cube after the V cube, and still turns pretty decently today. This is the Moyu Weipo, kind of the company's improvement to the original Lingpo, and I believe I originally got this puzzle as a Cubicle Premium puzzle, which is their old line of custom setup puzzles. Most of that loop has worn out though, and yeah, it still turns alright today. This is my, wait for it, Mohuan Xiaosu Chuwen 2x2, or simply the Chuwen. Now I actually did magnetize this puzzle, and it does turn very well, probably my second best 2x2 that I have right now. And then finally we have the Valk 2M, the same as my main speed cube up there. This one is actually an Angstrom version by the Cubicle, except the thing is this is only actually half of an Angstrom version. That one is also half of an Angstrom version. I actually changed out the magnets on that cube right there before getting the Angstrom version, and then I really like the Angstrom version a lot better. And so I swapped the pieces around so I get at least a little bit of Angstrom loop in my modified pieces. I'm now moving on to all the cubes that have previously been my 3x3 main, and there are a lot of them. First up is the DaYan GuHong. I believe it's a V2, and I believe this was my first ever 3x3 speed cube after the original Rubik's brand right there. This is one of the best ones on the market when I first got back into cubing and I started this channel. Probably my first ever unboxing video that I made on this channel, and yeah, it turned pretty decently. I was expecting to get a black one. I ordered a black one, and I got a white one. That's why you don't buy cubes on Amazon. Also, I did add torpedoes to them, which I bought from Lubix. Next up was the successor to that last cube, the DaYan ZhanChi. DaYan was definitely a really big name in speed cubing back in the day, and the ZhanChi was definitely the cube to get when I got back into speed cubing. Now this cube improved upon the GuHong, which was already super revolutionary, and this one just took it a little bit further. Next is another DaYan ZhanChi, pretty much the same thing, but this time in black plastic because I wanted to go to a cubing competition, US Nationals 2014, and of course they didn't allow stickerless cubes, so I got the black one, and this one turns, honestly, even a little bit better. Also, years later when magnets came around, I did magnetize it, which is kind of funny. This is yet another DaYan ZhanChi, this time a mini 55mm version, and this one I actually used for one-handed. It was a Rubik's cube, so it has special lubricant on the inside, and yeah, it made it a little bit easier to solve one-handed. Now this is a Moyu Weilong 3x3, again I think a V2. Now I actually bought this puzzle at US Nationals 2014 when I was supposed to be using the black ZhanChi down there. This was years ahead of the ZhanChi, but being used to using much slower cubes my entire life, this cube was way too fast and flexible for me at the time, so I made the very smart decision to start using it 5 minutes after I first got it for my 3x3 round in the official WCA competition. This is the original QiYi Thunderclap, so I used the Weilong for a long time and then I switched over to this cube. It still is a very nice and smooth cube. Even to today's standards, it still does turn pretty decently. And it also only does cost $9, so back then, and perhaps even today, it is a very good budget option. This is the original Valk 3, the first of QiYi's puzzles to be named after Matt's Valk, much like many of their newer puzzles up here. And for me, this kind of marks the beginning of modern speed cubes. It turns extremely well compared to all the ones in the past. I did wear this cube out a lot, so it doesn't actually turn that great anymore. I did magnetize it and everything back when magnets started becoming a trend. And I messed around a lot with the tensioning system, moving from the original spring system to a maglev tension system to a GAN GES tension system that of course comes from a totally different brand from this cube. Now this is the GAN 356 Air SM, my first ever GAN puzzle and my first ever 3x3 to come with magnets pre-installed. This is where that trend kind of picked up into mass-produced cubes, and this cube still does turn very well today, although nowadays you could find much better for $50. This is the Cubicle Labs MF3RS2M. So basically that means it's a puzzle called the Mofeng Zhaoxi MF3RS2, so it's the second version of that. And then Cubicle Labs came along and magnetized the puzzle. Again, this is before most cubes had magnets in them. And this cube still turns pretty great. It was also a lot cheaper than my previous speed cube, but I still switched to it. And finally, we have the Moyu Weilong WRM, the 3x3 speed cube that I was using just about a month ago before this new GAN one came out. This is where you started seeing a lot new extra features on these 3x3 speed cubes, like the ability to change not just the tensions of the puzzle, but also the elasticity settings. So basically how much the spring compresses and how much resistance you get while turning. Alright, to finish off my collection, we're going to be talking about the rest of my 3x3s, starting with some force cubes over here, going to some Rubik's brands over here, talking about the rest of my 3x3s over here, and last and certainly least, a bunch of cheapo dollar store cubes right here. So starting out with the force cubes, it's the same deal as the ones that I made with the Pyraminxes and the Skewbs, except now it's on 3x3, and these ones are actually transparent 3x3s. So it's these kind of like semi-transparent 3x3s that were stickerless, and I took them all apart and made them into 6 different colors. And I actually found some transparent stickers too that I put on, and so yeah, this one looks really nice, the clear white one. The yellow one looks okay, and the other ones just kind of look bleh with their dark colors. And somehow, when making a video that involved repeatedly dropping pretty much all of my puzzles, this is the only one that I lost any piece from. And I actually lost 2 pieces from the same puzzle, so I have no idea where those center caps went. This is some old Rubik's branded 3x3, turns just about as bad as you'd expect, and somebody custom made it to have these pictures of mountains on it, so not really sure what that's for. This Rubik's branded 3x3 is... wait a minute. That's a stress ball. Now this is actually an original Rubik's brand 3x3. They're old ones that look like this, not their newer ones that they somehow managed to make turn worse. And I actually made this one turn, like, surprisingly well. Way better than you'd expect a Rubik's brand to turn. The one problem with it is it does pop. Not the center caps, but the pieces do pop out, like the edges do sometimes. But I basically sanded everything down, lubed it really well, and actually put magnets in it, and it just turns amazingly for a Rubik's brand. This is one of the newer Rubik's brands I was alluding to that they supposedly tried making turn better. It is definitely more solid. It won't fall apart in your fingers like this, but, like, right out of the box, it is super tight. I actually bought this to use in a swimming pool because I didn't want to ruin any of my other 3x3s. And actually, right out of the box, one of the centerpieces was broken. This is the Rubik/GaN 3x3 speed cube, which, just like I was talking about with the 2x2 down there, GaN, a really good company, came along to Rubik's, an awful company, and made a pretty decent cube. It actually turns pretty well and uses GaN's mechanism. And the one unique thing about this cube, aside from the fact that I have 2 of them and I just swapped them out without you noticing, is that they actually have these nice tiles instead of stickers, which some people don't prefer because they kind of stick out of the plastic, but they are pretty nice. And this one I actually put magnets in, which makes it turn a little bit nicer. This is a Fengshi Strong Run 3x3, which is a company that I don't think really makes 3x3s anymore, but basically it has this weird cap design where you have an inner part and an outer part, so it allows these weird combinations of pieces where you have like inner black and outer white. And so people would call it an illusion cube, and this cube's turning was known for being really nice and sandy. This is another original Valk 3x3, but this time in stickerless. I was sent both the stickerless and the black version to review, but of course at the time I preferred black puzzles, so I just used that one as my main. This one was kind of just a backup, and I actually put magnets in this one before I put it in the black one because I didn't want to ruin my main, and it actually turned out really nicely. This is the Sen Huan Mars S 3x3, just kind of a random 3x3 I was sent to review, and yeah, the turning of it is kind of unique. It turns alright. Yeah, just kind of a weird 3x3. This is the ShengShou Pearl 3x3, basically one of ShengShou's attempts to make a decent 3x3 speed cube, and I think they did make a pretty decent speed cube. It is pretty cheap, but nowadays there are probably better budget options. This is the YJ GuanLong Plus 3x3, same thing as the GuanPo Plus down there. I don't know why it's in white, but it's a nice budget 3x3. This is the GuoGuan YuHu Pro 3x3, upgraded version of the original GuoGuan YuHu, which a lot of people use as a speed cube. It has a pretty unique feeling to it, very fluid and very smooth. This is the Mofeng Jiaoshi MF3RS2, basically the unmagnetized version of the MF3RS2M, which I used as my main back down there. This is the Yushin Kylin 3x3 V2M, which was a very nice budget magnetic speed cube. It has magnets and everything. It has these built-in tiles. Just a very nice option for a budget. But I did lose a center cap while skiing with this cube. This is the DaYan Tangyun M3x3, which yes, is a 3x3 speed cube made by DaYan, a company that has been irrelevant in speed cubing for many, many years now. They tried making a comeback with this weird magnetic cube that is super, super smooth. And it is kind of nice, it's kind of fun to solve on, but it's not that great compared to other options nowadays. This is another nice budget cube called the YuLong V2M, which was actually set up by the Cubicle Pro Shop, so they lubricated and everything just how they think is best, and it actually turns very nicely. Even the cube right out of the box, I'm sure, would be very nice as well. This is the GuoGuang YuHu EDM, yet another improved version of the GuoGuang YuHu Pro, which I was talking about earlier, which has the same unique kind of smooth, fluid feeling to it. And this actually was the first cube to introduce adjustable magnets, as well as a nice elasticity adjustment system, just like my current main speed cube, the GaN XS. And here is the YJ MGC Elite, another kind of mid-range speed cube just like the last one, that has all the same features as that last YuHu EDM. So it has a nice elasticity adjustment system, as well as adjustable magnets. Here is my green screen cube, made out of a very cheap dollar store kind of 3x3. Basically it has all normal stickers on it, except for this side right here, which is purple instead of green, which basically allows you to use it with a green screen. The only downside is it turns terribly. This is a random knockoff cube from the 1980s that basically copied Rubik's mechanism and sold it for probably cheaper in a different place, and I basically lubed it with lubrical silk and it made it turn actually pretty decent. It does have the wrong color scheme though. This is a very old cheap ShengShou Win 3x3, which I have used for pretty much every single video idea imaginable. I use this underwater very many times, and I think most recently I put every single lube that I own in it, so right now it turns very smoothly and also very sluggishly. This is another really cheap 3x3, a QiYi Sail, that I've also used for many different types of videos. Most recently, as you can see, stickering it really badly. I think I was stickering it like one-handed or having a non-cuber do it or something like that. And finally, we have a mysterious QiYi 3x3 where somebody walked up and handed it to me at Nationals one time that has a really awful color scheme on it. Like, just look at that. And it turns really, really badly too. So I think somebody took a really old QiYi cube, like the original Warrior or something like that, and messed around with the color scheme. Yeah, I don't really know. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I don't really care that I just dropped that cube. If you watched this far in the video, then very good job to you. Leave a comment down below to let me know. Say something about platypuses or platypi or however you say it. I don't really know. Also, if you rewind back to the beginning of this video, there'll definitely be a distinct change in the sound of my voice. After 8.5 hours of recording, I can barely talk anymore. So yeah, I'm gonna leave now. See you guys next time.